Hello, and we'll be looking at MSByrne swing, and to kind of compare it to, we have Keegan here on the right, like many people I think correctly suggested, would be a good swing for us to take a look at because of the very similar um, positions at address that both of them have, and yeah, you can clearly see they are very, very, very similar. I picked this video too because in your video, the camera isn't quite down the line of aim, right? We can kind of see how your feet, the mat, everything's pointed a little bit to the right. And the same thing here with Keegan. He's pointing just slightly to the right of where this camera is aiming. In fact, we can kind of see the shot. See how the ball travels slightly to the right. So it'll be a good comparison for us. Really, the very first thing that people commented on is really, just how hunched over you are, and not really hunched over, but just how kind of flat sort of you seem to be at your address. And some people pointed out that that's too much, and that would cause problems. And it's definitely more than the norm. But if we just measure this real quick, we kind of draw a line from your hip bone, kind of the top of your neck, right? And we do the same thing with Keegan in this video. I mean, it's basically the same, right? And that isn't to say that it's perfect, that it's textbook, but I think certainly it makes it hard to argue that that's a really big thing that's kind of limiting you from playing good golf, right? Keegan can do it. Certainly something that can work. Definitely not textbook, but I don't think it's the first thing that I would worry about. What I would worry about when it comes to your posture, and I think this is kind of the big thing with your swing, is, I'll just run real quick here. We can kind of see Keegan. Okay, he swings. And let me go to his impact position. And here's close enough. And let's say I were to draw that line again. I'd pretty much be drawing the exact same line, right? So, his posture, right, his spine angle at his address and when he hits the golf ball is basically the same. You, on the other hand, right, if I just go through your swing and then hit the golf ball, we really see that spine angle has completely broken down, right? And we have something more like this. And when it comes to your posture and spine, I think that's really the big issue. Not so much kind of where you start, but the fact that where you start and where you finish is completely different. And when you break down spine angle, it's just so hard to swing the ball consistently, right? Because, all of a sudden you're not turning along, the same plane, right? You're just now all of a sudden all off flatter, and you have to do all kinds of things with your hands to kind of make up for it so you can hit the golf ball. And it's just very, very hard to do that consistently. And it's just, I mean, unlike your the setup address, there is no good PGA Tour golfer that just has this kind of breakdown in his spine angle and still hits the ball consistently, or is a player even that we see on TV. So that's something that we have to address. There are drills that people do to kind of help them with this. So if we just go back to your setup, one of the things that's very common, and I did this when I guess I still struggle with this too, is you can kind of you can do this at home. You don't have to be at the golf course, right? You just set up, but with your back towards the wall. Imagine this purple line is just the wall, and you just try to practice your swing. And the idea is to kind of do the whole thing while still making sure your butt is touching the wall. Because you notice when you break down the spine angle, right, you get really far away from that line, which makes sense, right? I mean, you're slightly bent over, then you get straighter. You're going to get this separation, right? And the idea is, if you kind of do that practice swing, and your butt's always touching the wall, you get to kind of feel what it's like to maintain that spine angle. And that's something you can definitely work on. But what I would suggest actually is that there might be things in your swing that are making it difficult not to do that. And I think if I were to suggest kind of the first thing for you to work on is I would actually compare you at the top of your backswing with Keegan. So let's take you both back to address here. And yeah, pretty similar. Your hands are maybe a little bit further forward than his, but you know, not the biggest thing we should focus on. You know, if we take you to about club, just about parallel, and Keegan too, pretty similar here. Maybe his club's a little bit further inside, yours a little bit further outside, but you know, again, nothing terribly glaring, pretty similar. But if we keep going, right, and you know, we can just go straight to the top. There, you guys are very, very different, right? And there are a few things I'd like to, you know, for you to pay attention to. First of all, it's kind of a little bit hard to explain this, but we can see how much closer Keegan's shoulders are together, right? Excuse me, not shoulders. His elbows are together. Whereas in your case, right, your right elbow is tucked way behind you, almost parallel to your body, right? And they're very, very separated one from one another. With Keegan, they're really close together. And that is one of the keys for making really, really good and solid golf swings, is to really keep those elbows and those arms together. You can look online. You can just Google like Ben Hogan arms together or something like that, and there, you know, and he was a big advocate of kind of making sure those arms kind of swung and sync and stayed together, and not have the kind of separation that you do. But right, and so we see with Keegan, you know, his elbows are still very much in front of his body, right? In your case, right, you're really, really stuck behind. They're way behind you, which would make actually turning really, really difficult, because you know the club's not in front of you; it's way, way, way behind you, and that's contributing to a lot of other stuff. If we compare, I know it's hard to see here, but you know Keegan's club face is very much pointed out here. Your club face is almost pointing to the sky, right? Which is definitely not what we want. And more, or equally importantly, if we just kind of draw the line of where you're aiming, right, and we can just kind of maybe be a little bit harder to do, but we can just kind of maybe get the line here for your toes, right, and then we draw the club. So that was 41 degrees, and this is 17 degrees, right? So your club is pointed way much more to the right than your line of aim. They're not parallel. But if we do the same thing with Keegan, you know, let's say here 66 degrees, sure, and we do the same thing, yeah, see, 66, pretty close, right? So, you know, his feet, the line of aim, and his club at the top of his backswing are all pointed in the same direction. You are just crossing that plane completely, right? So the club's stuck way behind you. This is pointing way off to the right, and that will definitely contribute to just making it almost impossible for you to bring this down plane, right? From here, you basically have two options. You either come over the top, right, or you just come way on the inside. Coming down on plane is, from this position, about the most challenging thing that you could do in your swing, which is why I think this is when you should focus on first, right? And really look at Keegan's position and try to really keep these elbows much closer together, have this much more in front of you, and have the club much more parallel, right? Which to your line of aim, which I think would make everything else in your golf swing a lot smoother. Because from this position, we can just take a look at, right? You try coming down, you know, but the club is just so far behind you, you're stuck, and you get to about here, and you're like, I need to save this somehow, right? And what you do is you basically, and this is really the only recourse you have, is you throw your hands at the golf ball, right? And if we compare you to Keegan, right, take a look at your right arm, right? Notice here how we have this incredible separation, right? Your right arm is basically straight, right, and it's really separated from your body. You look at the same region here with Keegan. Notice how his right elbow is really tucked in there, right? Like I talked about that connection, right? It's just it's almost like his right elbow is trying to chase his left elbow, right? In yours, you're just basically completely straight and just hitting at the golf ball. And I think this is happening because you're getting that club so far stuck inside. Now, if we just think about the geometry of this a little bit, right, we'll take it back. I'll clear that line real quick. Easier to see. Okay, so this is you at address, right? And we have this nice little angle, right, with your right arm, like this, right? But then, when you hit the golf ball, right, you're just basically straight, right? Well, there's a lot, when you have this kind of straight line, it's just basically longer, right? If you don't have this kink, right, it's basically a triangle, so the hypotenuse is longer, right? And if you do this, you would always hit the ball fat, right? The only way you can't hit the ball fat is, well, you got to be further away from the ball, which is what we see happening, right? If we just kind of look, just draw this little line here in your head, just about here. Whoops. I'm going to do this, right? Okay. Now notice how you just you come up on it, right? Because you need to create that extra space, and that's just the moment where we also see you breaking down that spine angle, which makes sense. Because if your right arm's going to be that stretched out, right? The only way that you're not going to chunk it is you really need to be now further away from the ball than when you start. The only way you can do that is basically standing up, which is what you do. Beyond that, right, we can just make this line at the golf ball. We'll do the same thing here with Keegan. And since you haven't, since you stop turning and you just throw your hands, notice how, the ball basically travels along that little blue line, but notice where the club is now after you hit the golf ball, right? It's to the outside of that. So, again, same thing, really way outside in, which explains kind of what you see with your ball flight. You're like, well, I either hit a push fade or, it's a hook, and that's what this is going to cause, right? The push fade will basically have this shot path, but also have your club path, your club head open, right? And the hook, you'll have this path, but then, have your club head closed, and you'll just basically have this massive hook that you'll experience, right? And since you're not turning, another thing that you can kind of look at and compare for yourself, we can look at, so Keegan hits the ball right about here, and we can just draw a line right here, so 64 degrees. And now we have him, and his backswing, 63, pretty much the same, right? But with you, so you've hit the golf ball right about here, so you have 62. And then notice you in your backswing, or in your follow-through, right? Extremely non-parallel, which is, again, just another indicator that the club wasn't turning around you anymore, right? You were just throwing the club at the golf ball. But so these are, I think, a few things that you can notice. But my advice would be, again, to really focus on the very top here, because I think all these other things that we kind of talked about, your hips moving forward, you're throwing your hands, you're crossing here the plane, and hitting the ball way inside out, your arms stretched out. I genuinely believe that it'll be very, very difficult to focus on those things if we don't fix this first. And so I would focus on kind of trying to get as close to what you see here with Keegan, right, first, and then address the other things that we talked about. I hope this was helpful, and message me with any questions.